What's up, Eva?
Hey, Tony. How's it going?
Welcome to Hangry and Horny.
That's so cool. It's great to be here in the F-Bomb studio.
The F-Bomb Factory. Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
such awesome that Ross and Kara just gave us the place to host this, and
This is the best.
Yeah.
So this is cool. So we're like doubling up on the interwebs right now because we're also live on my Instagram, and I have so many rad people who love rad stuff on there, and it's great. It's awesome. I feel like I have a really great online community. I'm so happy that
this is cool. I feel honored that one, this is your first podcast ever, and then two, it's the first time I've ever done a podcast live on Instagram. Yeah, so
man, we're gonna open up a wormhole to a new dimension.
Oh, seriously, I've heard so much about you from Ross and Kara, and they were telling me about sort of your background as a survivalist in nature, riding motorcycles, just all these different things, being on the Discovery Naked and Afraid show. So there's so many things that I want to talk to you about, all these experiences that you had, and how this all began for you, this journey.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've been hearing so many good things about you, and I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you. All the things that you said are true. I am on the Discovery Channel Naked and Afraid show, which is awesome. It's been a part of my life for maybe the last 5 or 6 years now at this point, ever since the show, before it was even on television. And when I'm not doing that, I'm riding motorcycles, and I spend most of my time traveling. I ride a BMW adventure bike, and I just love getting off the road, and I love going on long trips. And somehow between the survival stuff and the motorcycle stuff and coming home to Flagstaff, Arizona, where I love so much, I just feel like I have this awesome life experience going on right now, and I feel so fortunate.
So were you always a vagabond spirit, or?
You hit the nail on the head. Always. I have always been a wanderer and a little gypsy girl, and I've lived all over the country, 9 different states, 20-something different cities over the course of my life.
And that was from your childhood with your parents, or afterwards, when you finally left home?
Afterwards, for sure. Yeah, I went to high school all in the same town. I grew up in Connecticut. In Connecticut, people are kind of yeah, I think I've heard of that. Where even is that place?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yukon.
Yeah. Other side of the state. So, maybe an hour north of New York City,
okay.
Straight up suburbs, we're talking just suburbs, and that's what it was. But it was interesting at that time because it was the city centers were expanding, and the suburbs were in this process of transformation from sort of loosely packed suburbs to densely packed suburbs. And so when I was a kid, we would just go out and free range explore and build forts, and there would be these forgotten tracts of land that we would cut our teeth on and have little home bases and find little forgotten nooks of the world that were still wild, that were still woods, even though the city was kind of creeping in slowly. And I think that's where it all started.
And your parents allowed you to just go out and have fun in the outdoors and just be home by dinner kind of thing?
Totally.
Okay.
They've always been so supportive of me and whatever sort of crazy mission I'm on. It's whether I'm I'm gonna just fly to Peru and ride a motorcycle around for a while, or I'm gonna go on a crazy television show and take my clothes off and survive for a month, or buy a house in Flagstaff. It's really I just have this great support network. My parents, my whole family, they all think I'm a little crazy, but they love me a lot. So it's awesome.
So you've had this inkling from the get-go, as far as you remember, exploring and being creative and just finding ways to learn new things and see new places.
Totally. Yeah. I've done a lot. We lose it sometimes. There's times when I feel really connected to that essential part of myself, and then there's times when I feel really disconnected from that. And there's been phases in my life, which I'm not in one of those phases right now, where I look around and I'm who am I? Where do I belong? What am I doing? And I feel when I'm in those places, I am not myself. I am not who I need to be. And you just get this funny feeling. And fortunately, I've developed the survival mechanisms to realize whoa, I'm kind of off the path that I ought to be on. I'm disconnecting from myself. I'm not spending enough time outdoors. I'm not treating my body well. I'm not connecting with the people that I need to connect with. And I think, I feel I've been fortunate enough to live the kind of life where I've gotten to kind of go down the wrong road and then come right back to the path.
So you're pretty astute now in terms of noticing when you are disconnected.
Totally.
Okay.
I'm super keyed into it. And like, it stresses me out. Like if I see myself going a direction that isn't working, like the first thing I realize is I'll realize that I'm a little stressed, I'm a little off put, like, like things aren't working right, things aren't jiving. And like the first thing I think is like, okay, what am I doing? What's not working? And what do I need to do to correct my path?
What example would you give, like in your childhood, like maybe school, sitting in the classroom, trying to like sit still and learn? Like where would you, because you're like a very energetic, like bright, like soul and person, and so was that the first time where you felt like you were out of place?
I was really good at finding my place in school, and it was not in the classroom. I graduated from my high school with more alternative credits than any other student. They basically rewrote the laws after I left because there was this path path that you could follow called independent study, and so you could make a class proposal, and this was in public school. Nobody was like doing any sort of revolutionary alternative ed in Bethel, Connecticut back in the 80s and 90s. And so there was this sort of path where you could make a class proposal, get it approved by a number of instructors, and then be able to spend that hour of your day doing whatever you want. And so I invented like audiovisual classes and photography classes and art classes. And so like I kind of figured out a good way to work that system. I wasn't really that connected with school. It was fine. It was what it was. But I spent way more of the time that I remember in the art class and running around outside and escaping.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, is that like, you don't seem like the type that can like be the traditional like student in a classroom.
Totally.
And you had the I guess you were very lucky that you could actually have that option to take that creative path.
Yeah, I felt like school was just a lot of putting up with a lot of BS and rigmarole. Like it was what it was. It's like getting out of high school was just like totally liberating, totally like this newfound sense of freedom, which was so cool. So yeah.
So what happened like after high school? So now you're out there in the world. You're still in Connecticut. What was next?
After high school, I went to college. I went to a really cool school called Emerson College in Boston, Massachusetts, and it was a totally cool place back then. I don't know what the school's like now, but it was like I was in the darkroom all the time, and I was working on like, I thought that I was going to be a great filmmaker someday, which is hilarious. And so I was like all about like going in there, becoming a filmmaker. I really wanted to go to like the Tisch School of the Arts or USC or some really prestigious film school, but it was, spent too much time squirreling around in high school. You got to get good grades for that stuff. So, so I went to Emerson College, and it was so cool because it was like a trade school for the arts. So I spent all day like working on projects, doing the kind of experiential learning that I think is so valuable.
Yeah,
for
you got that hands-on experience where you're not just like learning like intellectually, but in the world, like practically.
Totally. Yeah, you're just like, you're in it, you're doing it. And that's where we learn. I mean, that's what real life is like, So I kind of fast-tracked through college. I spent about 3 years there, which was great. And then immediately moved to California, like ran screaming from the East Coast. And then ran screaming back to the East Coast after living in California for a while. Like I was just like, whoa, that was a big jump. That was not what I needed to do. And went back and
where in California did you go?
I was in Santa Cruz, which is a really rad town. It was really
totally
cool. And I was there, for a really critical moment of my life, which was awesome. And then I got there and was like, okay, I looking back on it now, I feel like I learned the lessons that I needed to learn, at that point, like that I was free, that I was independent, that I could do whatever I want. And I made this like epic pilgrimage back to the East Coast and found myself in New York City, kind of like going back to this place that felt really comfortable and familiar. Like I was, like kind of in this urban environment, which like kind of felt safe at the time after being in Boston for my college experience. But I kept getting the sense that things weren't what they were supposed to be. And I would take the train up to Connecticut, and like one day, one of my girlfriends, I rode the train from New York City up to Brewster, New York, which is just upstate a little bit. One of my friends picked me up and she was like, hey, Eva, you've been doing that rock climbing thing. I'm working at this summer program and they need people who can do rock climbing with these kids. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. So she picks me up at the train station. We drive out onto this property that's like right on the Connecticut New York border, and it was called Great Hollow Wilderness School. And it was like a light came on in my head, and a part of myself that I had not seen since I was that little kid running around in the woods, like it's like something just clicked. And she like drove me onto the property from the train station. I was like, oh my God, Rachel, like this is where I need to be. I need to be in this place. And she was like, well, maybe they can give you like a job or something, you know? And it's like, we were climbing in the gyms and like at Chelsea Piers and stuff like that. And like, you know, kind of, I thought I knew something about rock climbing or whatever. And all of a sudden, like I realized like I was back in the woods and I was right where I needed to be. And that started a really essential 10-year period in my life where I worked in outdoor education.
So describe this feeling that you had, this like instant epiphany. How would you describe that?
You know, it was like, God, how do you describe an epiphany? It's like where you're looking at something and you have this sense of familiarity, even though you know you've never been there before. I had not been to that place before, but like seeing those trees and smelling like that, like New England summertime smell where you can like smell the streams running and like you can smell like the leaves unfurling, and like it's just everything is so alive, like the grass is growing, the streams are running, and like you just get this sense of like raw real nature, and like you're just so incredibly like you're so connected to it. And you know it because it's sort of that like that resonance where it's like all of a sudden I'm vibrating on the same level that the world around me is. And like that's, you know, like we talk about like earthing and grounding and nature deficit disorder, right? And it's like I think I had that moment where all of a sudden like
It synced up.
it just synced up. That's exactly the word for it. And it was
Okay.
so cool. It was so cool. And so like, you know, I came back a couple days later and interviewed with them, and I mean, that was, it's so funny saying it now because I haven't really thought about this moment in a long time, but it's like that is really one of the most defining moments of my life. You know, if I had to pick a handful of defining moments, it was that day, the day that Rachel picked me up from the train. It was really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, one of the things that I'm always fascinated, because I've had those experiences too, and I just love when someone retells this story. It's like you're right back there, and I can feel it. I see it in your eyes. I see
cool.
the body language, and you know, it's like you were saying, like, how do you describe an epiphany? You know, and it's like, well, you did, and I had that same feeling, even though sometimes like we may use like different words to describe it, but there was like this sort of like you can relate, you know. And so to me that's what I call like a flow state, right? And that's when you feel you're most alive, you lose track of time. And everything around you just like glows, so to speak, right? And there's no sense of like separation. Your mind is clear. You feel like very alert and charged and like very engaged. So let's go backwards. Like when you went to Santa Cruz, what happened?
Man, so I moved out there with this guy that I was seeing at the time. Got out to Santa Cruz, thought it was like the coolest place, but it was, you know, it wasn't my time to be there. You know, it was cool to go out there, and like I think I had to get thrown into something where I was a little bit in over my head, like a little out of my league. You know, Santa Cruz is a big place with some big energy, and you know, you're by the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the single most powerful forces on the planet. I mean, that is a massive ocean, you know.
A big change from the Atlantic Ocean.
Totally different. Yeah. Totally different. So it's like, you know, you're reversing polarity, like your tides are flowing in different directions. You know, it's like it like was this
stronger current.
It was so different, right? So you think about like, right, if you're an East Coast person, like you're used to like this flow, right? And then when you go to the West Coast, all of a sudden to be thrown into exactly the opposite flow, it just kind of, it spun my whole world on my head, you know? It was hard. I struggled really hard being there. I did end up finding a really great, amazing, powerful job that was so cool. But I just knew that it wasn't my place. It wasn't my time. Like, it wasn't my time to be there. And one of the big lessons that I learned is that sometimes you have to be okay with leaving things behind. sometimes the things that move us forward are the saying no, the changing directions, and being like, you know what, I thought that this was the direction I want to go, but it wasn't right. And we don't know that until we do that. And it's part of that exploring process and part of that learning process. And I think, sometimes like our life is measured by what we gain and what we accomplish, but sometimes it's measured by what we leave behind and let go of. And so I think that's where that sense of that started, was being like, yeah, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go. And the day I left, it was so cool. I went and got a coffee at the little coffee shop. I lived on the west side of Santa Cruz. Got my coffee. I was like, okay, I got to say goodbye to the ocean because I'm about to drive back across the country in my crusty old truck. I get my coffee. I walk out to Westcliff, and it's like this massive storm front was like coming into the ocean. I left, and Santa Cruz was pummeled by this crazy hurricane. And I was like, okay, this is my sign. This is the right thing to do. I got to get out of here. And you could just see it coming. When you can see that storm rolling across the ocean like that. And it was like...
the timing.
It was perfect. And it was kind of like this, okay, I'll see you again, ocean. But it was... it was definitely the right time for me to hit the road. So.
That's cool. So earlier on, you were talking about Rupert Sheldrake and the morphic resonance, and
yes.
And so you're obviously very attuned to energies and frequencies, which in some ways it doesn't necessarily have to be new agey, because the brain waves, the heart waves, and the muscle waves all have a frequency to it and an amplitude. So being connected with nature, and then seeing this sign of the storm front coming to Santa Cruz, can you describe, when did you start noticing the signs or signals,
Man, that's so funny. Because I don't like to pretend that I'm too woo-woo or anything. I like to pretend I'm just I'm a pretty straight shooter, pretty scientific, whatever. But then I say things come out of my mouth and then this storm front came at me from Santa Cruz. I'm I sound such.
I know.
You
do the same.
I do the same stuff.
Yeah.
So when it comes to somebody like Rupert Sheldrake, that's why he is such a. My dad turned me on to Rupert Sheldrake when I was a kid. He started telling me about this concept of morphic resonance, and I was young. It was too big for me to get my head around as a young person. But I really appreciate people who can kind of take that hard science and mix it with stuff that we think is kind of woo-woo and out there, and start to make those connections. I always think if we don't have some weird thoughts and fringe ideas, we never grow, and it's the places where we're uncomfortable, or the places that challenge us as people, is probably a good direction to start exploring into next, and so if I was listening to this Rupert Sheldrake thing last night, and it was if this is a place where if his ideas and what he's presenting are making people feel uncomfortable as a collective, kind of shaking the roots of concrete science, maybe that's the direction we need to look into, right? And that's how we should explore anything. It's you could go down this nicely paved, straightforward road, or you could take that bumpy, awkward, crooked looking one that goes off in whatever direction, It's I think I think that's important. I think it's good to honor both sides. It's good to honor the known parts and the constant parts, because that stuff keeps us kind of grounded. But if we don't get into the uncomfortable stuff and the weird stuff and the things that make us feel a little out of place, we're not growing. So it's all about staying right on that little cusp.
Yeah. There's sort of this line that we all have. A friend of mine, an author, Scott Carney, calls it the wedge. Ooh. And basically, he wrote a book of what doesn't kill us, and he looked at people like Wim Hof, the Iceman. I was how did they adapt to these extreme environments where they put themselves in these uncomfortable positions, and then they learn to control their physiology through breathing and mindset.
Right.
And then our bodies just adapt through time. So it's the same thing with weight training, where you lift a certain weight, and then you need to lift a little heavier in order to get that muscle to respond and adapt.
Right.
So the same thing when you're exploring these new territories, whether it's in your mind or in the outside world, and then having the sense, and that's the next question, is where did you start to understand this? We were alluding to earlier about your instinct and your intuition. you know, like on how like you're saying, like you just knew it was time to leave Santa Cruz, or you would go into the woods and you would go into some sort of hidden place or a place that was unexplored, and then at a certain point you're like, okay, we need to like turn back.
Right. Right. I think so. That sense of instinct, I think, is something that no matter what phase of my life I've been in, whether it's been like a more urban type phase, being in Boston or New York or Seattle or any of the city type places that I've spent time in, and in the wilderness places that I've been in, that is something that I feel like I've always been able to rely on and come back to. You know, like when you're in the city, like your spidey senses are on high alert. You know, it's like you I like to think that I personally always have a good sense of what's going on around me, like what, you know, especially like when you're navigating more challenging parts of the city, like you want to keep your wits about you, you know, and we always say that. My mom would always say that when I was a little kid. She'd be like, keep your wits about you, Eva. Don't, you know, like, you know, if I was a little kid and I was going to be getting on a train or heading off in some different direction, you know, keep your wits about you, you know, she would always say that. And we have that, you know, we have that and we own that. And I think like honoring it and not overriding it. Like so often I feel like we'll have an intuitive or instinctual choice come to us and we'll be like, no. And you try and use your like brain to like logic your way out of it and think like, oh, no, it's not, you know, let me think my way through this as opposed to feeling your way through things. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel really lucky that I've always had that sort of sense of instinct and it's always been there with me. I don't know that I've always made the best choices, but for the most part, you know, it's like a muscle, you know,
Right.
like you have to like trust it, you have to exercise it, you have to honor it, you know, you have to let it rest sometimes.
Right.
So
Yeah, hone those experiences. So where does like being like a woman come into play? Because now you're going into these places that could jeopardize your like safety, you know, and yeah, like how did that like come into play with just going to these, you know, places that you could be taken advantage of?
totally. Gosh, you know, it's funny. I don't think much about being a woman. Like I like to just sort of be a human. I'm also, I think I have an advantage. I'm really tall. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm strong. Like I ride a big giant motorcycle. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, you definitely have like a presence.
I have
about
a
you.
presence.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I try and remember this because I always think like, okay, like I'm not saying like I can definitely be overpowered by somebody who's having ill intentions towards me. Like I'm very aware of that as something that can absolutely happen. But that said, I'm also not the same kind of target, I don't think, especially now that I'm in my 30s. I mean, when I was in my young 20s, maybe more so because I was a little dumber and a little blonder and a little like
more naive.
Yeah, a little more naive. But now I feel like, you know, I travel with a sense of presence. And I always think about this. Last year, I was in Peru riding my motorcycle. I flew down there, got a bike, and just went on a trip around the southern part of the country, which was totally cool. And they would have these border checkpoints, right? And so I'm rolling up on my motorcycle. I've got my helmet on, I've got my jacket on, my big riding pants, and I've got my, you know, my bag strapped to the back of this like overgrown dirt bike. And it would very often happen where I would pull up to this checkpoint and the guard at the checkpoint would be like, you know, "Senor, give me your papers." And like, there was a couple of times when I would pull my helmet off and I would be like, "Oh, you need my papers?" And they would just about lose their shit because like they're thinking like, here's some guy on a big motorcycle, which nobody has big motorcycles down there, you know?
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden I take off my helmet and like,
It's like
they'd be
senorita.
like, "Oh my God, like you're a girl."
Yeah.
I'd be like, "Mm-hmm." And you know, it was always so funny. It was such a great interaction to be able to take people
Yeah,
surprise
surprise them, yeah.
which was so cool. And I had several, and so it really ended up becoming like a really positive point of interaction for me, you know? So like, and it happens in the States all the time. For some reason, like Peru comes to mind because I had these really wonderful conversations with some really cool ladies down there. And like, I'm looking at these ladies who are like these old ladies, like slogging through the Andes with giant bundles tied to their back. And I'm thinking like, these old ladies are badass, right?
Yeah.
I've got a motorcycle. I'm not working hard at all. And then connecting with women in different towns that I would stay in and like the women would be like, you are doing something so amazing and so powerful and so cool and so inspiring right now. And it's like nothing in the world makes you feel better than have another woman say that to you. You know, it's so cool. And I have like some really awesome, you know, women who like check in with me on social media and they're like, you just do so much kick-ass stuff, Eva. Like, and it's such an honor. It means so much to me. You know, it makes me want to make sure that I'm always making good decisions in my life and making the right choices and like being the kind of person that people can continue to look up to.
So you're obviously like very confident, you know. Were there times where you were doubting or you just sort of questioned like obviously a decision or being in a place?
I think I keep that sense of doubt and self-doubt very close to me. I keep that as like the like sort of the beacon by which I make all my decisions, you know? Like I feel like there's I don't know that I try to acknowledge my sense of self-doubt, but I try not to let it drive. It can ride in the back seat. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I do doubt myself, like, okay, am I making a good decision? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right job? Am I, you know, like, am I spending my energy in the right ways? Things like that. And, you know, to keep that healthy sense of self-doubt, I think is like, becomes self-preservation, becomes instinct, you know? But, I think,
Like I'm thinking of the women that are looking at you. You know, you're 6 foot, you're a powerful person,
yeah,
and they might like compare themselves, like why, like oh that Eva could do that, or Eva can travel to these kind of sketchy countries, you know, where there's
mm-hmm,
like ill will intentions of other men, you
sure.
know, multiple men or something. So what kind of suggestions do you have for them to like be able to express themselves the way that's true to them
Yeah.
and still be safe, you know?
Totally. Well, I always think like not everybody is cut out to climb Mount Everest. And I've said this before, you know, like not everybody's cut out to climb Mount Everest. Not everybody's cut out to ride their motorcycle around the world. But everybody, you know, not everybody's cut out to run an ultra marathon, right? But I think it's our responsibility to figure out what that thing is that really gets us jazzed and really makes us want to push ourselves and find that and lean into it. Maybe for somebody it's being like the best accountant ever, or like being an awesome preschool teacher, or like, you know, being a really kick-ass artist, you know, but like find that thing that pushes you and challenges you and go that direction, right? Like I think that's super important. And especially for women, like I want all the women out there to know that we don't need permission. Nobody needs permission. You don't need permission from me. You don't need permission from some man. You don't need permission from your husband. You don't even need permission from yourself. You have full permission to go do all the badass, amazing, kick-ass things that you were meant to do. Like, so your only responsibility at that point is go do them, go find them, you know, and keep digging. Get to that place where it's uncomfortable and you're scared and you don't know if you're making the right decision, and just lean right into that.
Yeah, what would you say to someone that saying, well, that's easy for you, you're like single, you don't have a kid or kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would be your recommendation in that sense? Like, let's say you were a mother,
Right.
with a husband.
Right. Well, you know what? Be that most badass, kick-ass mom ever. You know, be all about doing rad stuff with your kids and for your kids, and then be brave about realizing that you need time for you too. I think that's one big thing. You know, I just had an awesome workout this morning with my friend Corey, who has a new baby. Her baby's like 6 or 8 months old at this point. And like it's so cool, like to walk into her house and she's hanging out with her baby, and then she passes her over to baby daddy, and she's like, we're gonna go for a workout in the park. And it's like, we have to remember to take that time for ourselves. And whether you're being a mom or you're growing a business or whatever it is that you're nurturing in your life, those things I think can feel really overwhelming and really all consuming. And I think we have to remember that if we don't take time for ourselves and don't replenish our own well springs, we can't take care of anybody else. So, you know, for the moms, for the, you know, less freewheeling gals out there, you know, figure out what it is you really need. Like, what gets you so jazzed, and figure out how to make it happen. You got to.
Pretty much like carve the time for themselves, even
Yeah.
though they have all these other responsibilities.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with just being like, you know what, I'm going to go to yoga class once a week, or I'm going to go for a walk with my dogs and leave my cell phone at home. You know, I think it's important to I think it's important to remember that we can scale things. It doesn't always have to be climbing Mount Everest or riding your motorcycle around the country for 3 months straight. Like it can just be like something little and simple, and like, and remember to take as much joy in that. And this is something I struggle with, to remember that like little moments can be big moments, like sometimes like taking a nap is amazing. Like sometimes like being like, you know what, I'm not gonna do that work thing right now. I'm just gonna sit on the porch and stare at the clouds with the dog for a little bit. And remember that that's important too. Like it doesn't have to be something monumentous for it to be worthwhile.
Right, like always high performing, just like being like full throttle all the time and trying to take on the world. Like,
Totally.
and I think that's a lot of people get this misconception of like professionals, or they're almost like superhuman, but like everybody's got like a weak point. Everybody definitely needs to like rest at some point, or back down, a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. That's super huge. I forget sometimes. Like I'm like, I always say I'm a number 7. There's like this, about the Enneagrams? It's like
Oh yeah,
a personality typing thing. And so the number 7 is called the enthusiast, right?
Okay.
And I want to do all the things all the time. Like I want all the, all the experiences. I want to go to all the parties. I want to hang out with all the friends. I want to do all the work. I want to have all the jobs. And it's like, you get to this point where you are like, have run yourself into a tizzy, and you can't see straight and you're working way too much. I mean, we all get this way sometimes I think it comes from a place of passion, but it's like, it's so essential to remember to like to check out for a little bit and like take it down a notch and like, just breathe a little bit more and slow down a little bit. All that is important, we live in like we're surrounded by technology all the time, right? And that just like keeps us ramped up nonstop.
Yeah, it feels like a performance right now, and so there's definitely a focus, and the body's like pretty much stepping up for this to happen. Has there ever been a like rock bottom moment for you, or a place where you were depressed, sad, anxious?
I've definitely gone through a few like noted dark periods in my life. It's so funny, like even saying that, I'm like, ooh, I don't even want to go there. Like I don't even want to I don't always do well spending time in the shadow places in my life, I've dealt with some like really challenging family stuff that like really kind of like threw me off for a couple of years. I've dealt with some personal stuff that's kind of rocked me a little bit. But not being in that space, it's so nice. I feel like it's so, everyone's always like, these are just lessons. It's important for you to have these challenges. But when you're in the midst of like a really hard, shitty, dark spot, you're like, fuck your lessons, fuck your challenges. Like for real, man. Like it's like you just don't want to be there. And like we all know that place where like you just feel kind of cornered or trapped, and that you can't see your way out, like you can't logic your way out, you can't clever your way out. And sometimes I think when you're in the midst of it, you just have to like hunker down and go through it, and you just grit your teeth and you just embrace the suck and you just cry as much as you need to, and you lean on your friends, and like, I can't even tell you like how thankful I am for like this amazing network of friends, especially in those challenging times, It's like, yeah, it's just so nice, like not being there. I'm in this place in my life right now that is so full of elation and prosperity and success and love. And I can't even tell you, I'm like on cloud 9 in my life right now. Things are so rad, like, and that's why I feel like I'm like, ooh, I get to connect with so many rad, awesome people, and I feel like I like to stay in that spot. But like sometimes like we don't always get to be there. We don't always get to be at that crest. You gotta be down in the troughs. You gotta be in the trenches too.
That's pretty much life, right? Yeah,
totally.
Life is that way. And so how would this sort of be related to being in the survival situations now? Because there's certain times where it's scary, or there's no food or no water.
Totally. Like, so So with Naked and Afraid, the first time I did it, I went out for 21 days and I had no idea what I was getting myself into, right? The show wasn't even on TV at that point. Like we just had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And so that was sort of like this sort of innocent stumbling into challenge, right? A couple years later, I did a 40-day Naked and Afraid. And you know, all this stuff is on TV and you can get the television version of it if you watch Discovery Channel. But there's, you know, there's two different versions of Naked and Afraid. There's what you see on TV and then there's what you experience from the inside out, you know, and they look very different, you know, and as you can imagine, because it's TV, it's TV. Yeah. So they only take like the drama and they splice it with the other drama. Sorry, Discovery Channel is what it is. You guys know what you do.
Like, you have to make it palatable.
It's TV, right? And so you need these little bite-sized things, which is totally cool. And you get a sense of what it's like to be out there, but you don't get the real sense of what it's like to spend 40 days completely naked. You have no shoes, you have no blanket to pull over you have no tent, you have no tarp, you have nothing but a knife and maybe a buddy to rely on, right? And then you are heavily observed. You have these people staring at you with cameras, you know, and they want to know what's going to happen next. And so you're like this combination of like this like prehistoric version of yourself, but you're on display. So it's like, it is such a bizarre experience. And so you're doing this like intense survival because you're starving, you're naked, and you're just trying to figure out the next thing. And 40 days, it's like if 21 days is like, you know, a 10K fun run like downtown with hot dogs at the end, I feel like a 40-day Naked and Afraid is like some kind of ultra marathon through Death Valley level of hell. It is so hard. It is so challenging. It's so taxing on your body. It's, you know, we always talk about here in the F-bomb thing, how important the fat is to us. And you are so fat deprived and so protein deprived. Your mental function is like just being massively depleted. You know, I was in Colombia for my 40-day one.
Where was the first one, the 21 days?
First one was in Madagascar, which was awesome. Super cool environment. Colombia was amazing too. But it's crazy. Both of these, I speak a little bit of French, I speak a little bit of Spanish, like conversational level, right? I can get my way through. So when I was in Madagascar, like I was speaking French with everybody, translating for the crew. And by day 21, like I could barely get my English out, you know what I mean? And the same thing happened in Colombia, like walking around in the town, like just bullshitting with everybody.
Yeah, fully like integrated
in everybody. And then, you know, 40 days, like I can hardly remember how to communicate in proper English, let alone like communicate in Spanish with these people like in the town once we got out. And it was just like, it just speaks to like how depleted your mental functions are out there. You know, like you see people get skinny and you see people get dirty and you see them not eat, but what you don't realize is the toll that it's taking on your body from the inside out, between like the muscle atrophy, the parasites, the depleted mental function. It's like it's really hard.
Right.
It's really
and
hard.
You have bug bites, you have cuts.
All the bug bites, all the cuts. I damn near cut my finger off. I got 6 stitches in the field.
Oh,
like no anesthesia, just from like having a space cadet moment because I wasn't thinking well, you know? Like, oh, and you're covered in bugs. There's so many bugs. The bugs are gnarly. But you know, like, but it's like you're operating on a different primal level of who you are. You know, you are like a Paleolithic version of yourself. You know, you are like tapping into some real ancestral knowledge that we're really fortunate to get to touch into every now and then, you know, and it's really cool because we're born knowing how to survive. We would not have gotten this far in the world if we didn't have ingrained survival skills, you know. It's in our makeup, it's in our lizard brains, it's in our cells to survive out there, you know. Somebody who looks just like you was rubbing sticks together a lot of years ago trying to make a fire. And I think that that's what we all need to remember, is that like this stuff is built into us, but we're so removed from it as a society that it's like novel to see people do this on television.
Right.
And so I just feel so honored that I got to have that experience. Like it just, talk about something that really like will reaffirm your belief in yourself and your sense of self-esteem. It's nothing like a challenge like that.
Yeah, so you went in with some of these skills already built in because you found your passion, as we were alluding earlier.
Yeah.
So you had to learn some of these things, and then you got picked to be on the show and ended up going.
Yep.
So I have two questions. Like, how would somebody with no experience fare out there? And right, because we've been so far removed with modernization. And then two, what was the moment where you were in there and you realized, holy shit, like, there's no turning back?
So I think there are definitely a lot of people who turn up on the Naked and Afraid show now who don't have a ton of experience. Some people will be like, oh, well, I'm really into like doing adventure races. And so I spend a lot of time being muddy and like, I think all that's great. And I do think at the end of the day, the thing that gets you through is like that sense of perseverance, the thing that gets you to the end of the big race, the end of the marathon, the end of, the top of the mountain, whatever that is.
Yeah, you're tired, you're hungry, you're afraid, all that stuff.
All that stuff, right? And so being able to persevere in the face of that, I think is the ultimate survival skill. But I will tell you, it's really nice to have a background in primitive survival going in there because you already understand what it's like to be cold, what it's like to be wet, hungry, how to deal with the bugs, stuff's crawling on you, how do you make a good fire,
where to get water. Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So those are all like, it's nice to already have some of that in your back pocket when you're going out there, rather than being like, oh yeah, like I keep going back to the adventure based thing because that is very adventurous and cool and really fun, but it's not a survival scenario, like I think if you have seen combat, there's a lot of guys who go on the show who are veterans. I don't know that there's anybody who's active military who can go on Naked and Afraid, but like to have that sort of like sense of long-term adversity going in there and knowing what that's like, or having dealt with some real life challenges for long periods of time, especially ones where you don't get to sleep in your own bed at night. I think having that kind of experience is really helpful for people who want to go on that show. Like really, I think you ideally would have, like you should know how to make a friction fire. You should know how to purify water. You should like have some sort of rudimentary understanding of edible and medicinal plants, that's my personal thought.
Right.
That's like a very few and far between.
Yeah, they never teach this in school. We're taught that like life's gonna be smooth sailing.
Totally.
And but there's possibility that we could have some sort of nuclear thing, another war, environmental disaster, like
totally.
And most people would totally like die, like I guess a lot of people in war and like concentration camps, like if they didn't have that like sort of perseverance or a meaning,
totally,
like Viktor Frankl's like search for meaning, like then most of those people like end up like giving up.
Right. I love that idea of like identifying that thing that separates like the survivor from the victim, right? And it's like on some level, I guess I wonder, like, is it up to us? Are we born with that? Like, does everybody have that ability to survive through like true adversity? Or are some people not cut out for that?
I've always been curious, like if there was like a gene for that, or was that just a mental like frame of mind that you just decided and choose,
right?
Or you had like something like, okay, this sucks really bad, but this too shall pass, right? And that's why I asked about your rock bottom moments, because for me, when you first have one of those, you think life is over. You're like, I was on the brink of suicide, and there was this moment where all of a sudden, like, I completely surrendered to that darkness, and people talk about this with even like plant medicines and psychedelics. There's like this moment where there's almost like a death of the ego, part of this personality, where you had this image, a frame of like how life like should be, and it doesn't fit. So you're in a survival situation and you're like, this sucks because I can't get Amazon Prime right now, I can't get like Netflix, you can't play video games, and you start to realize, holy shit, like I love food, I'm thirsty, like I'm cold, right? It was nice to have a bed.
Totally.
And part of why like you and I are like, I call it like flow-matics, it's just we are used to like sleeping in different places and like being uncomfortable, going to like foreign like sort of unknown territories, right? And so we're able to use that evolutionary process of our brain to like notice patterns, signs, or signals.
Yep.
So, so yeah, that's the whole like survival aspect of like whether people are born with that or is that something that's learned. It's up to debate. But where during your survival with like Naked and Afraid, where one back to that second question, like where you like realize like holy shit, there's no turning back, and then at that point the full acceptance.
The moment I took my clothes off, the first time. So this is something I think that's so essential, and I think it's something that's a lost skill, but is to go into something fully committed. You know, I walked into that first 21-day thing, and I remember like they drive you in a little Jeep out to where you're gonna like take your clothes off and meet your partner. And I remember this moment where I stepped out of the Jeep, I took my shirt off, and I was like, game on. And this is it from now until day last. And you know, I mean, like literally, like I would have to like fall off a cliff, or like a tree would have to fall on me for me to like feel like I could like hit the escape button in that situation, in that scenario. You know, and I think if you approach it with that sort of resolve, that steadfast, like this is a challenge. I mean, the thing with Naked and Afraid is, you know, you're getting picked up at the end, right? If you survive, you're gonna get a sandwich, and you're gonna get to put your clothes back on, and you're gonna be like, you'll get to the end of the marathon, you know, which would be a very different scenario than like, you know, a like massive disaster, right?
You know,
so
you
then
don't
you're
know
just
if it's gonna ever end.
totally.
Yeah.
And so you have that. So in that sense, it's
That's
like
reassuring.
it's reassuring.
Yeah.
It totally is. It's super reassuring. But that said, like if that becomes like your known factor, you know, it's like a math equation. Like if that's on the other side of the equal sign, you need to figure out what you need to do to get yourself from day 1 until day 40. And it's like constantly evaluating your personal needs, constantly making sure that you're taking care of yourself. If you have a little cut, you better make sure that it stays clean and doesn't fester, because a giant infection spreading up your leg could be a really, really bad thing. You have to make sure like you're constantly evaluating your priorities. In survival, it's shelter, water, fire, food. And you just keep going through those over and over in your head. Like, do you have shelter? Because exposure can kill you real quick. Do you have water? Dehydration will kill you in a matter of days. Fire is like, for me, it's like a psychological win. Like if you can keep your fire going, like you are that much better. Not only is it great for making you feel emotionally good and emotionally uplifted, it is the thing that you can purify your water with. You can cook your food. If you're like, you know, if you catch a snake or a lizard or an animal of some sort, now you can cook it. And just like, it's like this emotional reassurance to have the fire thing. And so you're constantly evaluating your survival priorities every single day, every single minute. You know, there's like shelter, water, fire, food, shelter, water, fire, food. Okay, I need to drink water. I'm feeling a little dehydrated. Better drink. And then once you're good with that, you're like, okay, ooh, firewood pile's going down. Better go get a bunch of firewood. And then at that point, I'll be like, okay, let me go see if I can find a snake or a lizard or something like that. And it's just this constant effort, constant work. So, you know, you like, I mean, for me, I just turn on to that environment. And it's like, for me, like my thought is like, okay, how do I work with this place that I'm in? How do I, like, what's the common ground? Like, what's familiar to me? What are my low-hanging fruits, my easy to learn lessons in this environment? I think, you know, like,
So you knew like your playing field. So once you knew your playing field, then it was up to you to sort of make it every day.
Yeah.
You know, to survive.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep, totally. And you know, they say like if you throw a pebble into the pond, like the way the little rings spread out, the concentric rings. And so you learn your environment in the same way like those concentric rings spread. Like you learn your immediate environment, and then you can make a little bit bigger circles to start to understand a more broad area. Which I just think is such a cool concept, you know, like if you're a little pebble and you get plunked into the middle of an unknown environment, you know, Like,
there's these stages of development and learning
Totally.
throughout that whole period.
yeah.
Okay, so it's like you have the core important things,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can, once that's like stabilized, then you can go to the next level.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Well, it goes like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Right.
Like, which is a concept that in education it gets talked about a lot. Like, you got to make sure that like you have like your baseline needs,
Covered, yeah, before you start going for self-actualization.
totally. You're not going to write the great American novel if like, well, for me, I'm not going to write it unless I have coffee in the morning. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So it's cool though. I mean, I just love that kind of experience because it's totally immersive, right? And it goes back to that experiential education thing. It's like, what happens? It's a great human experiment. Like, what happens if we drop these people off naked in the middle of nowhere? It's such a great opportunity to experiment with yourself on a physical level, on a mental level, and on a spiritual level.
There's so many like segues I want to go on this. It's just nuts because so let me start with one. Okay, where did you realize again? Like you said, that the moment you got dropped off, you took your clothes, you met your partner, so that you knew that like, okay, it's on.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so at that point, did you feel like something turn on in your brain or in your body? Like you all of a sudden you like went into like lizard primal mode or anything like that?
Totally. So it takes a little bit to get into that space. I always say like 3 days. It takes 3 days to really acclimate. Like day one, things feel prickly and you feel extra hot or
you see that
extra
with
cold.
people like camping, right?
Yeah.
That's been my case too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like really like it's
you have like doubts. You're like, oh shit, why did I do that? I want to just go back home and sit in my like couch, like.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And so it's really, like those first 3 days, it's like at the Boulder Outdoor Survival School, they call it impact, right? It's like, so like, it's those first 3 days where like, you're like shedding your city skin and you're getting down to like your primal skin, your animal skin. And I love that. Like it feels so good because you actively feel weakness leaving your body. Like I feel like at first I'm like, ooh, my feet are a little sensitive, because we wear shoes most of the time. And sleeping on the ground is like every little thing hurts, and like you're cold all night and like, you're getting bit by bugs and it bugs you. Everything kind of bugs you a little bit, and so you got to be really like in that impact. That's when you have to be ultra stoic. For me, that's where I go to. It's like I just have to like be really cool with this. Everything's pissing me off. My partner's pissing me off. They're bitching and moaning. Like everything hurts. My body hurts. My skin hurts. And you just got to be like, it's cool, man. This is all part of the process. But then after those first 3 days, it's like, for me, I mean, maybe it's different for other people, but like, it's like you're just in the zone. Like you just get into this space where you are like, you are more connected with your environment than you've ever been before. You're stronger. Your body has like a little layer of callus all over it. You are starting to really reconnect with who you are as a human being, as a part of nature. And and then you just roll with that for as long as you can, and you sort of ride that strong place as best as you possibly can, because it is a really hard environment to be in. So at some point, I want to say like 10 days to 2 weeks in, you hit another turning point where you like the physical depletion starts setting in, and no matter how much you eat and forage, you are at that point starting to go downhill, and so you have to be aware of that. So it's essential that in those first 2 weeks you get your bases covered as best as you possibly can. You make sure that like you've got your fire, you've got your water sources, and you have to remember to be like, this is not just a water source for today and tomorrow. This is a water source for this month and next month, and so you have to really like look down the line to know that like you're setting yourself up for long-term survival success, not just taking care of your basic needs right here and now. So
at any point did you have like a surplus where you could like thrive? Because we wouldn't be here unless like humans actually could like store things, plan things out in the future, and then actually be robust enough to finally think about like actually procreating, for example. Because at that level you're not even, I'm sure your hormone. There's nothing going on about like, okay, let's get it on or anything like that.
That's so funny. That's a question I get a lot about Naked and Afraid. Everyone's like, "Oh man, you guys are all naked.
Yeah,
You must
like,
be hangry and horny.
Yeah,
like,
right?
you guys must be like sneaking off and like doing it in the bushes." And you're like, no. You're thinking like, I want to eat something. Like, yeah, man, yeah, he's cute. Let me go take a shower first, right? I'll catch you later. It's like there is just that is not on your priority list at all whatsoever. It's like it is about bare bones survival. And I've had the opportunity to get to that surplus place, but not on Naked and Afraid, only in other non-televised survival experiences.
Okay.
Because the television aspect is additionally taxing, and it is also really impactful to the environment. So it's not just you and your buddies putting yourself out on a primitive, which is something that I've done on and off over the course of my whole life. It is, you have like this entire TV crew, and it just, you talk about those like ripples in a pond. It just totally impacts the environment so much more. They take showers every night, and I love them. I love you all, you guys. It's not that I don't love them. They're there to make a TV show, and to give the people at home this experience of seeing what it's like to be out there in this gnarly environment, but it's like it impacts the environment in a different way. So it's like the animals are out of there, so like your chances of getting lots of fish or big game or anything like that is pretty much out the window, even if you do have the skills to catch that kind of stuff, because it's like you have this whole crew. You have like 10 people tromping around with cameras and microphones and all that kind of stuff, and so it just really affects the environment in a way that
it's definitely different, because the real situation, there wouldn't be any any of that technology, any extra people,
totally.
Any cameras and
right.
Yep. So you had to play two worlds at the same time, right?
You totally
so
do.
That's also a factor that will deplete you energetically, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say that the crews who are making these shows are super respectful. They are so respectful and so understanding, and they're
trying to be a fly on the wall as much as possible.
Totally. Yeah. And they're awesome at it. They're really, it's been a real honor to work with so many awesome people out there. I definitely have some friends and some solid connections and some great people. So really it's been a real honor on all levels, to be a part of that.
Without them, we wouldn't have this sort of reawakened experience to how our ancestors lived.
Totally.
Right? So it's okay, we're swinging so far the other end of technology that we're losing touch of ourselves, which is part of nature, right?
Totally.
So technology is amazing. This is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is that aspect of ourselves that is rediscovered when we're in nature.
Totally.
And so, okay, it's so much going on there. What was the most challenging moment during that 40-day period?
The most challenging moment is probably when you hit day 21, because you've made it 21 days before, and you realize on day 21 of 40 days that you are basically starting a Naked and Afraid challenge all over again.
You're just beginning.
You were just beginning.
Yeah.
You just did, 3 weeks? You got another 3 weeks. It's the start seems so far behind you and the end seems so far in front of you, and you're just in the middle of it, and you are skinny and hungry and naked, and it's really hard in those middle days. It's also hard towards the end. The last week of the 40 days was really challenging, because then the end is in sight.
It's in sight, yeah.
But it's you want to stay engaged because you want to keep eating and drinking and taking care of yourself, but it's you also so
easy to lose focus and momentum, right?
Totally.
Right.
And so really staying actively engaged has been one of the big things. I think that's been one of my big learning lessons from Naked and Afraid, is to we always say out there, embrace the suck. You just got to embrace the suck, but really to remember every single day of my life to be totally 100% engaged, because all of a sudden, whether it's in Naked and Afraid or in life, all of a sudden it's over and you're getting picked up and you're going back to the default world. and it's over, and all that suck is behind you, and all those challenges are behind you, and all of those victories are behind you, and it's in the past, and you're about to go take a shower and put your clothes on and eat a sandwich, and you better hope that you made really good decisions with the time that you were out there. Like, you better hope that like you lived every day to the fullest, and that you worked your hardest to like get as much food and to stay as much in the thrive state as you possibly could. And then I always think like this is that metaphor for life, right? Because at the end of the day, like we're all going to be laying there on our deathbed, and there's not going to be any time in front of us, and it's all going to be behind us. And I just want to make sure that I'm like, wow, I used every day to its fullest. I lived it. I soaked it up. I relished in the mountaintops. I had so much fun in the peaks. And when I was in the shit trenches, I was there too, and I was there 100%. You know, and it's like that's how we want to live our lives. And I feel like, I mean, that's my greatest takeaway from Naked and Afraid. So
That's cool. So when you were like deep in it, that 21 day mark, you know, and you needed to stay focused, and it's hard to because you're obviously, you know, starving and thirsty and tired. And was that a point where like you really had to double down on your like focus? Because I could see things going completely like errant and wrong, dangerous, like where you I don't know if you cut your finger during that point, or you know, something could happen where you make a horrible decision, or you're just not there because you're not focused, and something bad happens.
Yeah, so, you know, at that halfway mark, like that 20-day mark, I was with a group of other people, which was really cool. And so what we kept doing is we just kept making a plan. So we would be like, okay, we're gonna get up early and we're gonna gather mangoes, and then you're gonna go fishing. I'm gonna be on firewood. He's gonna gather grasses so that we can redo our mats. Like, I'm gonna do this, you're gonna do that, and we all have our little to-do lists and our checklists. And so, and I think this is important when we're in any challenging situation, is sometimes you just take it down to like those very simplest little things. Like, okay, I have to get out of bed, and I have to brush my teeth, and I have to leave the house, right? And you know, like when you're in those challenging spots in your life, like sometimes you just have to like, you got to take care of just the little stuff.
Yeah, get the little successes in.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's really,
build on that.
Yeah. And that's what Naked and Afraid is really all about. It's about these little victories, you know? People laugh at us on TV, like we'll be like eating minnows, like these little tiny fish like this, and we're like, oh yeah, we're eating minnows, you know? And people are like, for real? That has 7 calories. But that's a little victory right there. That's 7 more calories than you had before, you know? And it's like, and that's what it is. Like anytime life feels big and overwhelming or dark and scary or whatever, it's like, okay, just what's the next step? Like, what's just that one little thing that I need to do to take that next step? Like, is it, you know, is it eat something good? Is it take care of yourself? Is it call your mom? Whatever. You know, it's like just keep taking those little baby steps until eventually, like you get out of it. You get back into the light.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this other scenario now, another variable that you're thrown into, where things a lot of times go wrong for like humans and tribes. It's because now like you're so tired, naked and afraid, and you have disagreements on what to do next, or someone not holding their weight, pulling their own weight, and there's like this sort of like a coup d'etat that possibly could happen, which will lead to even more disasters because no one's working together.
Totally.
They're all like bickering.
Yep. Yeah, we struggled with that a little bit. We definitely struggled with that. The like, you know, the way it works is you kind of start out on your own, and then you find some more people a couple days later, and you keep going until you find more people, and you'll eventually all group up. And towards the end of our 40-day,
Something's going on.
Is
out
this
there.
like the fat machine making the fat numbers?
Yeah, they're making some fat bombs.
I love it. So good. Yeah, like we struggled with that. You know, we struggled to stay graceful and kind to one another. You know, and
Yeah.
it was really hard, and there was definitely some ugly, challenging moments. You know, you see it on TV, of course. You see the ugly stuff on TV. You know, and then you see some of the resolutions. You know, my original partner, a guy named Jeff, like he was teamed up with another guy on our 40-day one, and like those two were on their own mission, and you know there was a little bit of bad blood between those guys and like some of the rest of us, and you know it was really interesting because I like to keep really positive relations with all my people, even if like I don't agree with you or don't necessarily see eye to eye with you. Like I feel like one of my great strengths and one of the things I pride myself on is being able to work with anybody, you know, and being able to stay amicable with people even if I don't get along with them. And you know, we got to that place where it was just kind of ugly and funky, and you know, like towards the end there, like there was definitely there was some anger, there was some like just people just get tired. Like talk about hangry. That is like next level hangry. You know, in normal life, like you miss lunch and you're like screaming and yelling and having a little hissy fit.
Yeah,
you know?
you're flipping out in traffic or
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Like try 40 days of not eating anything more than like a mouthful of food. It's like it really pushes you. You know, it really pushes you, and it's you know, you get down to like that real core primal. You get into like this real survival mode, and like sometimes it's like that eat or be eaten kind of mentality takes over, and it's really it's not pretty, but it's real. It's something that's really inside of us.
And do you think that you know that's what's going on with like society in some sense? Because you know even though we're not in the forest or we're in the bushes per se, like
Right.
people are still operating out of that sort of mentality despite all the abundance around us. Like we don't realize like how abundant and how blessed and lucky we are.
Totally. Totally. That's a big thing. That's like a big
Yeah,
that's a
because
big
like as
question.
soon as you like are done, now you have this like a massive appreciation for life and the things that like you didn't have in the bush.
Right. I think, you know, I feel like we're maybe in a particularly ugly phase in humanity right now. I don't know that we're always at our best, especially in dealing with each other. I think there's a lot of anger and a lot of ugliness going on in the world right now. And I think that if that's happening, it's because we are perceiving a sense of lack. You know, even in a world where, like, I mean, we throw away more food every day than, like, you know, I mean, what's the statistic where it's like if we just saved like a fraction of the food we threw away every day in America, we'd be able to feed the whole world 10 times over, something like that. You know, it's like why are we perceiving this sense of like lack, and it's got to come from some sort of disconnect with ourselves, you know, and that's probably where some of the anger and animosity and like just the general cultural dissonance that's going on in the world right now is coming from. And I don't know what the answer is. Probably everybody should go spend
Yeah, I
some
mean,
time in the
some
woods.
people like speculate that is, you know, from your upbringing, your environment with your parents, whether you had parents or not,
Right.
you know, or just one or none, or then you go into school and they're like teaching you how to become a worker, you know,
Right.
and then you get out of school and now you have to like figure out how to like make ends meet,
Totally.
you know, and then there's all these different things that sort of sets you up for fear mode and lack, and then all of a sudden you get the media, right, that's showing you like products, and you're like, oh wow, if I get to be at that status, I'm gonna
Right.
like make it and I can just like totally chill. And
Totally.
you know, and then there's people that reach that status where that's not even enough, so they have to like 10x it or 100x it.
Totally.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenging time. I feel like we're sort of in a shifting time right now. I feel like there's a lot of stuff coming at us, and I feel like as humans, like it's our responsibility right now to be the bigger person, to be like the best version of ourselves. But I don't know that collectively we're actively doing that, you know. I like to think that we all have it in us to really be wonderful, great, amazing versions of ourselves. But I don't know that as a species as a whole, we're at our finest right now. I feel like we could all do a little bit more to be a little less selfish and more selfless and a little kinder and a little more yielding. But I don't know. I mean, we're not rewarding that kind of behavior right now, especially in America. You know, it's like the bullies and the bad guys and the jerks are being rewarded, you know, and like the people who are kind and soft and open kind of get trampled on, I think, sometimes. So it's like, how do you walk that line, you
Right.
know, of being like strong but soft, right? And like that's that flow state too. It's like, how do you be really flexible but really strong at the same
Yeah,
time?
be like water, my friend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you and I've traveled so much, and we've seen like sort of, at least for me, I've seen the biggest slum in the world in Mumbai.
Have
You
you
know,
been
it's
there?
just
Wow.
like 20 million people in a slum, and it's just, and then I've seen like Skid Row in Los Angeles, or like even New York City or whatever. But it's so frustrating because even driving here to come to Flagstaff, I stopped in a place. I don't want to name the city, but I was like, holy shit, like this still happening in America, you know? And one, I get a lot of cool perspectives, like seeing these places around the world. And yet these people are so resourceful with what they have. And, you know, and a lot of times they're actually happier than the people I've seen that have everything here. And it's just really wild to see kids in Bali have like sticks and stones for toys, and they're having a blast.
Right.
And then the kids here are like freaking out because they can't get like whatever the latest toy is. I'm like so out of the loop with that.
Totally.
But yeah, it's just wild why people are now like even getting pissed at like immigrants or something. And they come from places where now they have freedom here, and they just fully take advantage of it. And then the people that live here are like jealous of that, and it's just pretty crazy like how us humans are, until like something hits us in the head or you're in a crisis moment,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy times right now. It's super crazy times. I wonder, you know, I think about this sometimes. Like, I wonder, like as a collective, like in my lifetime, are we going to see some sort of collective rock bottom? You know, like, because it's like, if that's what it takes us as individuals to change our ways, like, I don't know. I don't know if humanity's there yet. Like, I don't know.
I've wondered that too, because like our relatives, or say our like maybe our parents were just at the after World War II, right? And then our grandparents, and then the great grandparents, like they've all had like adversity with war,
Right.
and we've just had this sort of period where, yeah, there was 9/11, but that was just that one-off thing, right? We never actually had like a sense of being attacked,
Right.
right? And so 9/11 was beautiful because it did like sort of unite the country for a little bit. And then, you know, everybody starts getting soft again, right? And like, it was a cool time to be in New York during that period, right?
Right.
It was like, wow, I've never seen New York so collectively united.
Totally.
And now it's like, you know, we just take it for granted. So when you came out of the second Naked and Afraid, well, I'm sure the first one too, what was the feeling like now that you're reintegrating back into the world that we live in? Because we talked about this last night,
Yeah.
and how important this is. Because even like people that are in prison, or veterans coming into civilian life, there's not really this support or after support integrating back into life. And this includes transformational workshops, like weekend workshops, where
Totally.
you're like super high, and then Monday rolls around and you're back in your old environment. Like, what do you do?
Right. So I always say it takes 3 days to get into that space. And then for me, it takes about 3 weeks to come out of that. You know, like it is a slow process of reintegrating, because, you know, I feel like so many different things are happening on so many different levels. Like, for one, your perspective is so shifted, right? From any experience like that. You know, you're seeing the world through a completely new lens. You have worked exclusively with a close-knit group of people, and now those people are gone. So like you've got all these different layers going on. You come back to a world that hasn't changed at all since you've been gone. you come back to a group of people who know that you haven't been there and they love and support you, but they have no fucking clue what you've been through, you know, like, and like you come back and you're expected to just roll right back into it. And there's something about going from this world, the default world, the world of technology and whatever, into the natural world where that shift happens really naturally and really easily. But then returning from that natural, easy world, I mean, it's funny for me to say that after I just talked about how hard it is, but it really is, you're in your most natural state in that place. And then coming back to this is when things are really hard to get your head around, where like, you know, you don't necessarily have a support system, you don't necessarily have daily resources, you're expected to just be like the same as you were before. But how can you be the same when like your mind has been expanded, you've been stretched to new proportions? You're not going to just go back to being the person that you were before this survival experience, before this combat experience, before this prison experience, before this transformation experience, you know, whatever that may be, you know. And like this is really a topic that I'm wanting to explore more and to dig more and more into. It's like, why are we so elastic when we go into something, but so brittle when we want to come back? And it just makes me think that there's something unnatural and that there's something extremely challenging about coming back into this world as a default world, you know. And like we don't necessarily have the survival skills that we really need to work well in this world. You know, we have a bunch of learned mechanisms, a bunch of learned behaviors, a bunch of artificially created walls that we need to put up in order to function in this kind of society. And I think,
like most people are like, they don't know what they don't know. But
right.
Once you know and you go into something and you can see that people are pretty much asleep and they're
right.
in the cog of the machine pretty much, and then you have that contrast of different experiences, right? So people get that through extreme exertions in like competition sport or being out in nature like you were, or war.
Mm-hmm.
And then they actually miss, when they go back into society, they actually miss prison, they miss being in war. Not because, you know, because those places are familiar. I guess that even goes to like people, like let's say women getting physically abused in their like relationships. Like
Totally.
it's so scary now to like go back into that world, especially if it doesn't feel natural to you anymore.
Right.
And you're like, why is everybody complaining about that? They have no idea. So I'm sure there's a party that gets like irritated when you see somebody like maybe throwing food away, or I remember that's why my grandfather was so hard on us, because he was a POW and, you know, he lived on like barely a bowl of rice a day, you know, and had malaria and beriberi, all this stuff. So he just was frustrated, like interacting in the civilian world. I've had my special force friend. He's also used to being operating at a certain level where everybody works as a team. They like communicate, and what they say they do, they execute. And then you go back to this world, and some people say they're gonna do this, but it takes them like forever. They don't do it, or they don't hold their word. So
yeah, I think it's a topic worth exploring. Like, I think that there's a lot of, I was just saying this yesterday, this is like something that I want to write an article on. I really want to get into some of the meat of this, and I want to talk to some people who've had different experiences. I like that idea of like comparing like the veteran perspective with, you know, the like transformative weekend workshop perspective with, you know, the survivalist perspective with, you know, like I think about people who even like walk the Appalachian Trail or ride their bicycles across the country, things like that. Like I feel like these sort of long journeys that we put ourselves on, or like these environments that we put ourselves in, how do you come back, and how do you come back gracefully, and how do you come back to this big world with the perspective that like you can now share and grow and build your experience, you know, like how do you get yourself to a point where you're ready to I mean, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this stuff because it's such a big topic, but it's like
I find like, for example, like where's the middle ground? Where how can you have harmony between like the natural world and the technology? Because I love technology too.
Totally.
And it's so easy to get addicted to that, which a lot of people are now, and they're not like interfacing socially. Like,
Right.
there's just this, I don't know, it's being lost, and it's like we need to rediscover what it's like to like connect, to communicate, and in person, not just texting
Totally.
or on the. I mean, I like phones good, but there's more like data coming in person. That's why I do this show in person, right?
Right.
I can't do the Skype thing. It's cool because logistically it works, but
Right.
there's so much missing, and that's where we can go even more like esoteric. It's just there's something like enriching and deep, like being in person,
Totally.
and and then harmonizing with technology where we're using it as Archimedes' lever, so they don't have to spend like the pretty much what 18 hours in a day or whatever just to find food, and like that's the beauty of technology, is that now we have these systems in place where we don't have to like spend the entire day like trying to survive. We could actually go and self-actualize.
Totally. Yeah, it needs to be like that springboard for evolution, as opposed to that thing that like pulls us down to like some sort of rudimentary version of ourselves, like I think just staying connected to people. I'm such a people person. Like I always say that I just kind of suck at technology. Like I'm just not that good at it, like, and I think about people who are like very much like these public figures, and like they have this great online social presence, and they're like so good at posting things and interacting with their online people, and I'm like, people will be like, where's your YouTube channel? I'm like, really? I'm a people person. Like I know everybody in town. Like I talk to my mom every week, it's like I crave human connection. I love human connection, and I think it's so important. I think it's one of the things that keeps us healthy and balanced, and we just have to remember to stay in that space. It's really, really essential.
Yeah, I had that same issue with like social media and like trying to like run a sort of platform. And it's cool because it's like for the first time in history, like we can actually have our own media company, right?
Right.
But that's the same token. It's like now you have all these extra responsibilities, and you talked about having a certain amount of bandwidth. Where if you really enjoy being in this world and not so much the virtual world, it's so hard to like do that. For me, I'd rather hire a bunch of people who like doing that to outsource that. But in the beginning, it's like, okay, we have to kind of do this, and
Right.
So there's like upsides and downsides, obviously.
Totally.
I just think that like for me, I'm like just naturally a person that needs to be alone most of the time. But I do love people too, and so I found over time I just got better socially.
Cool.
And what's it like for you, being that like people person that can work through problems and communicate, like, but the other people in that Make It an Afraid show were like not as effective at communicating, and it's like you're doing your best, but they're not. Maybe they just don't have the skills to do that. Like, what's going on? Where one, are you frustrated, and two, what's going on with the others where they can't like effectively like work together?
God, yeah, geez, I don't know. I don't always claim to be the best communicator in the whole wide world. I think, like it's for me, effective communication starts from listening and perceiving. And so very often, like, I want to just sort of be quiet in that moment where, like, if somebody's mad or angry or frustrated or whatever, like, my default is first and foremost to shut my mouth and try and really get a sense of like where somebody's coming from. That said, it's, when you get to the point where you're just so depleted and so bare bones, sometimes you just don't have the grace, the patience, the elegance,
the capacity.
totally. And you just want to be like, you know what, I'm working my ass off out here. We all need to be working our ass off out here. And that's the long and short of it. And if somebody's not doing that, then it's really hard to empathize, to sympathize, to connect with that person anymore. Like all of a sudden, like if somebody isn't pulling their weight in a survival situation, you just like you just kind of like, it's very animalistic. You kind of just shun them, you know? And it's like, because I mean, animals do that. Like if they're not being an active part of the herd or the group or the pack or whatever, you know, like the other animals just kind of push them out. And I feel like I see that as human beings in a survival situation, even in the modern world. You know, it's like if somebody's like not vibing with your crew, you're kind of like, yeah, you know, you're just not really a part of this. Like you're operating on a whole different level right now, man, you know? And it's like, we just sort of do this like sort of self-selecting thing, you know, and we kind of like begets like, and we want to hang out with people who are like functioning on our level, you know, and like resonating on our level. And, you know, I think it's just part of being human,
right,
you know, and it's not always pretty, I think is the long and short of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because sometimes you can't just have like a cultish type of thing either, where you need somebody to have a different perspective. And I know that context is different with survival, but with these others sort of like hanging out with the same kind of groups of people, it's fun and like it's easy, but it goes into like maybe we need another person to sort of challenge our viewpoints and like maybe help us evolve where we don't get like locked in the dominant.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. And, you know, I think the thing with those survival scenarios is that you're just like, you just get so worked, you know, you just get so tired. And it's like, you know, earlier on in our conversation, I was saying like, you know, like if you're a mom and you put a lot of time into being a mom, or like you have a job that you put a lot of time into your job, like you have to remember to peel off that time for yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself first and foremost, you can't take care of anybody else. And I think a lot in the survival world, as much as I like to think that I'm like such a group person, a team player, like it makes me think like, wow, how much of my survival is just me taking care of myself first and foremost, you know? And it takes so much just to keep yourself hydrated, alive, breathing, eating, warm, dry, that you're like, you just don't have the energy to do that for anybody else, you know? And it's like, I think that's something that comes back into our regular lives. If we don't take care of ourselves first and foremost, we can't take care of our mothers, our kids, our friends, our family. You know, it's like you have to be constantly replenishing yourself and realize that that's okay. Like that's not bad. It's not being selfish. It's about being self-nurturing, you know, and it's about being self-supportive. And like, because first and foremost, you can have the best family, the best support network in the whole wide world, the best group of friends, whatever it may be. But if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't honor and respect yourself first and foremost, you got nothing.
At what point does, like in that situation of the show, did someone like maybe eat more than the group? Like they were just like, screw it, fuck it, I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna be selfish here. And then everybody else noticed. I was like, what the heck? Did that ever happen? Because I hear stories like that in survivor situations.
Yeah, you see it. You definitely see it. And like, you definitely will see like the person like sneaking food, you know, in Naked and Afraid and in other survival scenarios that I've been in. Like you'll see that person like put that thing into their mouth and then offer something to everybody else. And it's, you know, it's hard. You know, you have to decide like, okay, do you call that person out in that moment, or like do you let it slide? You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's a big decision. You know, you'd be like, whoa, dude, you just like put half the lizard in your mouth and now you're passing it around, right?
Right. Or someone ate like all their entire ration.
Right.
And then now they're expecting everybody else to like support them.
Totally. So I just had a survival situation in a location that I'm not going to talk about, but I just got back from it not that long ago. I'll be able to talk about it more freely soon. But so we were in this really bountiful, plentiful place, and it was by the ocean, and I'm allergic to shellfish. So one of my biggest fears going into this survival scenario is that what am I going to do with the fact that I'm allergic to shellfish? and now I'm going to be with a group of other people, and I can't eat the easiest to get, most low-hanging fruit situation. And like I was like, it put me in this place of feeling like potentially be the weakest link in this scenario. And so what I did in that situation is I was like, listen guys, I need you to know that like there's a lot of stuff out here that I can't eat. And it was so cool. The people that I was with were like, dude, no worries. Like we are going to do this thing together. We're going to come at this whole challenge where everybody is committed from the first day to the last day, 100%. And it became this non-issue, but it's because I think I was so forward and forthcoming with the fact that like I'm coming into this with a handicap, with a deficit, you know what I mean? And like it was really cool to be in that position.
Yeah, you came out openly vulnerable.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna like bitch and moan like if somebody gets to eat a snail and I don't get to eat a snail. I'm not gonna be like mad and pissy because somebody's eating a clam and I can't eat a clam. Like I'm just gonna suck it up in that moment and like, you know, I'm not gonna expect that anybody's gonna do anything special for me. But I just have to realize like my challenge might be more of a challenge than somebody else's. And so it was really cool being in that position. It was awesome.
That's cool. Let's start wrapping this up. So I got two more final questions. Like,
bring it on home.
Yeah, what was it like eating bugs?
I don't eat a lot of bugs. I only
or like, you know, I mean, obviously whatever was available in nature. So like a lizard, like whatever. What were you eating?
Oh man, so I've eaten some weird stuff. I don't eat a lot of weird, creepy bugs. Because bugs can make you sick. It's like, don't wipe your butt with a plant that you don't know what it is because you might have poison ivy on your ass, right? It's like, so you don't want to just go popping bugs into your mouth, right? So you want to know. So the bugs that I've eaten include grubs, which are really smushy. I like them toasted better. Crickets.
What does that taste like?
Just sort of like, I don't know, sort of like gooey, proteiny, I don't know, like...
It's nothing to compare to, huh?
No, like if you've eaten like, I don't know, like if you eaten like mealworms or stuff like that.
So I've had like cricket.
Yeah, so crickets
like
are...
cricket bars, you know?
Totally, so like...
That was kind of nutty.
Yeah, and crickets are great. You can toast them over the fire and they're awesome. They taste just like burnt popcorn. They're great. I've definitely eaten a lot of lizards. You know, I always take the guts out and you eat their little legs and whatever. Lizard's really tasty. I've eaten a lot of lizard.
So that's similar to frog?
It's a lot like frog.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a little chickeny, a little, I don't know, lizardy. It's its own special thing. Snake, same deal. Fish. I'm trying to think of like the weirdest things that I've eaten. And like, I mean, for some reason, like reptiles are just easier to catch. Okay. They're easier to catch than mammals. You know, I've eaten like squirrel, rat, mouse, stuff like that. Those are great because those taste like real meat. You know? Meat. Okay. Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Rodents, they're the next easiest to catch after the reptiles, I think. But you know, when you're in that scenario, anything that's like real calories just tastes good, you know? And the other thing that you can't overlook is the plant food, you know? It's like, if you have coconuts, you are so set. You are so good to go.
Yeah, now you got the fats in there for sure.
And so that's huge. And like, you know, like some of those plant foods like mangoes, like when I was in Colombia, we had a ton of mangoes, which was awesome, you know, because that's sugars. That'll just keep like the basic metabolic functions rolling. And so, yeah. But it's weird, you know, it's funny how excited you can get about like a 3-calorie lizard leg that's like a quarter of an inch long.
Yeah, or you said that like little like fish.
Tiny little minnows,
Minnows, yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So what about, let's get into this flow state.
Yeah.
And you're talking about last night at dinner about riding motorcycles, right? And how that just really just zones you in to the present moment.
I love that. Yeah, motorcycling has really been, it's been a real like life-changing thing for me. It's so cool. I got my motorcycle license when I was in my early 20s and kind of on and off I had motorcycles. But in the last few years, it's really just sort of stolen my heart and like become like my main passion, you know? It's like it's so simple. And I think what I love about motorcycle travel is that it becomes really elemental. If it's cold and wet and windy and rainy out, you're cold and wet and riding through the wind and rain. You know, if it's hot, you're hot. If you're off-road and something's challenging, you're working through these really challenging technical environments. Like and then when you're cruising, you know,
Yeah.
and it's
So
just,
it's all raw and
it's-
real that way.
yeah,
Okay.
raw. And I said that a lot of times. Those are two of the main words that I use motorcycling. It is raw. It is real. You have like, you've got this giant motor between your legs.
Yeah.
It's like, that is like some raw power right there.
Yeah,
That's
raw
awesome.
motor between your legs. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So-
and I mean, you're like, you feel everything basically.
Yep. Yeah, and you can't hide from it. It's like when you're traveling on it, like everyone wants to talk to you about your motorcycle, and like you get off the bike at a gas station and like, you're right there. You can't seal yourself up inside your car and roll up your windows and not talk to anybody. You are really like making a commitment to connect with your environment in a different way. And I think maybe not especially being a woman, but especially being a woman, it's like people all
Stereotypes, yeah.
They're always like, oh my God, look at that girl on a motorcycle. Look at that girl on a motorcycle. And it's cool. It's a novelty thing for people, and they ask questions and they want to know about my bike. My bike's like this big black motorcycle and it's awesome.
Like
and
you were saying earlier, like you're just being you. Everybody else put the label on you, right? Because I
Totally.
asked the question, but I asked it because I knew like people were thinking that way.
Yeah.
I know that you're just expressing yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, motorcycling is special too in that it's one of the only things in the world that is transportation, very practical, recreation. It's a sport, it's fun, it's a blast, but it's also an identity statement. It's us making a definition about who we are, what we ride, how we spend our time. And so there's very few other things that are as practical, as fun and recreational, and as identifying as riding a motorcycle. And it's cool. Like, it's really cool to be a part of a culture like that, and to be a part of a culture. It's like, I'm a girl who rides motorcycles. There's all these badass ladies riding motorcycles now. It's so cool, and it's like, I ride an adventure bike and there's all these badass people riding adventure bikes. But at the end of the day, we're all riding motorcycles, and we're all a part of like this thing that I feel like is like touching like the American dream. And it's so cool.
Wow, I can't wait to ride myself.
Yeah.
I've actually ridden before on like a dirt bike,
Uh-huh.
and that was exhilarating. That was
Mhm.
incredible.
Yep.
All this stuff that's happened, everything from the Naked and Afraid experiences, like riding motorcycles, being like a creative artist, working with women, like all your experiences in life, like what's next for you?
Ooh, gosh, great question. Everything's really fun and exciting right now. I've been working as an event planner for the last year or so, and like engaging in these really cool events, whether it's with the F-Bomb guys who I love so much, or like doing something like Paleo FX or Ragnar Relay, and like helping do brand activations with those guys, or I work with an organization called the Overland Expo, which is all about adventure travel and overland vehicle travel, and they're so cool. And then doing my own events here in Flagstaff. Like, I do a lot of stuff with charity. I have a veterans charity that we just started here in Flagstaff. It's called ABV. It stands for Arizona Breweries and Veterans. And so we run craft beer events. 100% of the proceeds all goes to veterans initiatives in Northern Arizona. So we've got that going on. We just got our 501c3 status for that. So that's super cool. I do stuff with the local Humane Society. I really just love doing anything that involves engaging with my community and being able to give back at the same time and create a really positive, fun experience for people. So that's what it's all about. Eva Rupert Events. I have my own LLC now. It's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So Eva, how can people like follow you like on social media or your website?
Yeah, so I'm rolling out a new website. It's evarupert.com. It should be out in the next couple of months, but you can go evarupert.com, simple, straightforward, all one word. And then on Instagram, which is my favorite social media, it's August Eva. I've got Twitter, Eva_Rupert, Facebook, of course, Eva Lynn Rupert, Eva Rupert. Just find me, look me up. It's Rupert with one P.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I purposely ended it a little earlier just because I can't wait to have you on again. You're invited to come back
I can't
to
wait.
Hangry and Horny. Yeah.
Well, this has been such a treat. Thank you so much, Tony. Like, I've heard so many great things about you, and it's such a great time having an awesome
Thank you so
conversation.
much. Yeah.
Thanks for all your great, intuitive, wonderful questions.
Thank you. And everybody, thanks for listening and watching. And until next time.
Yeah. Awesome.